In the farthest reaches of the galaxy, there existed a powerful and ruthless alien empire known as the Sci-Fi. They were feared by all civilizations, their name whispered in terror by species from every corner of space. For thousands of years, the Sci-Fi had built their empire through conquest, crushing anyone who dared to stand against them. Planets fell one after another, like dominoes tumbling under the relentless force of their military might. Their fleets were enormous, their warships unmatched in power. The Sci-Fi had perfected the art of warfare, blending advanced technology with brutal strategy. Their weapons could obliterate entire cities with a single shot, and their armor was nearly impenetrable. Any species they encountered was quickly overwhelmed. They left no survivors, only ruins. The Sci-Fi had underestimated Earth's defenders, but the battle for the planet had only just begun. After their initial surprise attack, the Sci-Fi thought they had won. They expected the humans to quickly surrender, overwhelmed by their superior weapons and advanced technology. But to the aliens' shock, humans did not bow down. Instead, they fought back. In every corner of the world, from the dense jungles of South America to the busy streets of Europe and Asia, human soldiers rallied. The first to respond were ordinary people, farmers, teachers, doctors, and engineers, who picked up whatever weapons they could find and joined the fight. Even children and civilians did their part, helping wherever they could. The human spirit, fueled by a deep sense of survival and unity, was ignited. In major cities like New York, London, and Tokyo, human forces launched guerrilla attacks on the Sci-Fi invaders. They didn't have the powerful weapons the aliens had, but they used their knowledge of the land to their advantage. Urban terrain, forests, mountains, humans knew how to use their environment to hide, attack, and escape when needed. They set traps, ambushed alien patrols, and sabotaged supply lines, making every move by the Sci-Fi a costly one. One of the key players in the resistance was Captain Sarah Mitchell, a skilled strategist and former military officer. Sarah had lost her entire family in the first wave of the Sci-Fi invasion. Her personal grief turned into pure rage, and she became a symbol of human determination. She led a group of soldiers in a daring mission to steal alien technology, hoping it would give them a fighting chance. Meanwhile, in underground bunkers and hidden military bases, human scientists worked around the clock to reverse engineer alien technology. It was slow progress, but they made breakthroughs. Human engineers managed to adapt the Sci-Fi's energy shields to protect Earth's defenses. Meanwhile, hackers began to infiltrate alien communications, feeding false information to confuse the enemy. Despite the aliens' advanced warships and weapons, the Sci-Fi were not prepared for the chaos the humans were creating. The human resistance wasn't just fighting to survive, it was fighting to protect everything they had built. The Sci-Fi had expected an easy victory, but now they were facing a battle they had never experienced before, a fight where the odds seemed to favor the underdog. As the days passed, the alien forces began to realize that Earth was not the weak target they had thought it was. The humans were fighting with everything they had, refusing to give up. The Sci-Fi were facing an enemy that could not be broken. Earth wasn't just fighting for survival, it was fighting for its future. And the humans weren't backing down. Conquered worlds were made to submit to the Sci-Fi's rule, or they were wiped off the map entirely. No one had ever managed to defeat them. No one had ever made them retreat. The Scyther's reputation was absolute. Their empire stretched across hundreds of star systems, and no army was powerful enough to stand against them. From the smallest, weakest races to the mightiest galactic empires, all had fallen before them. Then there was Earth, a tiny, insignificant planet at the edge of the galaxy, surrounded by nothing but vast, empty space. Its inhabitants, human beings, had only just begun to explore the stars. Compared to the mighty Sci-Fi, they were nothing. Their technology was primitive, their weapons outdated, their cities small and fragile. To the Sci-Fi, Earth was a curiosity, a world that might have some worth in terms of resources, but certainly no strategic importance. The Sci-Fi leaders, in their arrogance, saw Earth as an easy target. They made the decision to invade. One more world to add to the collection, they said, laughing amongst themselves. The humans, they thought, would be crushed in a matter of days, perhaps hours. No resistance could stand against them. The Sci-Fi fleet, led by their most feared general, Commander Varath, set its course for Earth. Their warships, sleek and menacing, glided through space like sharks hunting for prey. Their path was clear, their victory certain. Commander Varath watched as Earth's blue and green orb appeared on his command screen, a planet unprepared for the nightmare that was about to descend upon it. Varath's expression was cold, calculating. He had led the Sithar to countless victories before. He had never lost a battle. "Prepare to invade," he ordered. "Humanity will learn to fear us as every other species does." His fleet began their descent toward Earth, and the Scythar warships cut through the atmosphere like knives through butter. The first humans to witness the alien ships were paralyzed with fear. They could see the massive silhouettes in the sky, darkening the sun as they blotted out the horizon. The roar of their engines shook the very ground beneath them. There was no way the humans could survive this. They had no chance. As the Scythar began to land their forces on Earth, the planet's government scrambled. Military leaders, diplomats, and civilians alike were all caught off guard. Humanity was not prepared for such a threat. It was only then that the realization began to set in. Earth was facing its greatest challenge ever. But the Sithar didn't anticipate one thing. They didn't understand humans. Humans were not like the other species they had conquered. Yes, they were weaker in terms of technology, but they were resilient. They were adaptable. They were creative. And most importantly, they were resourceful. When faced with impossible odds, humans had a way of surprising everyone, including themselves. The Sithar underestimated the power of human will. They assumed that their superior technology and overwhelming force would break the human spirit. But they didn't realize that humanity, despite its flaws, was capable of more than just survival. It was capable of fighting back. The first human strike against the Sithar forces was a small, desperate skirmish. A group of soldiers armed with outdated weapons ambushed a scouting party of Scythar soldiers. The alien invaders were surprised by the ferocity of the humans' attack. Though the humans were vastly outgunned and outnumbered, they fought with everything they had. They used their surroundings, blending into the forests and cities, launching hit-and-run attacks. The Sithar hadn't expected such tenacity from a supposedly primitive race. It wasn't much, just a small victory in a very large war, but it was enough to send a ripple through the Sithar command. They had underestimated Earth. They had underestimated humans. This tiny, insignificant planet was showing more fight than any of the Sithar's previous conquests had. As Commander Varath reviewed the battle reports, a single question began to form in his mind. What if Earth was different? The story had just begun. The Scythar's invasion of Earth would not be as easy as they had hoped. They had made their first mistake. They had underestimated humanity. The question now was, could they still win against the humans? Or would the Scythar find themselves facing their first defeat in centuries? As the war raged on, the Scythar were beginning to feel something they had never experienced before: frustration. The human resistance, although vastly outmatched, showed no signs of surrender. Despite their primitive weapons and lack of advanced technology, humans fought with an unyielding will that shocked the alien invaders. The Sithar had never encountered an enemy like this, one that would rather die than give up. Among the many brave individuals standing up to the Scythar was Sergeant Jake Carter, a former mechanic-turned-soldier. Jake wasn't the strongest or the smartest, but he had something the aliens couldn't comprehend: heart. He had a family, a home, and everything to fight for. When the Scythar invaded, Jake lost everything in a single day. His home was destroyed, his family killed, and his life changed forever. But instead of folding under the weight of grief, Jake used it as fuel. Jake's small unit was tasked with a critical mission: infiltrate a Scythar base deep in the mountains and sabotage their weapon systems. The humans knew this mission was nearly impossible. The Scythar had fortified their base with advanced security, and their soldiers were everywhere. But Jake and his team were determined. Using their knowledge of the terrain, they moved quietly under the cover of darkness, slipping past alien patrols and avoiding detection. Every step was a risk, but Jake knew the prize was worth it. As they neared the Scythar base, tension filled the air. The closer they got, the more dangerous their mission became. But Jake refused to give up. He remembered his fallen friends, the ones who had fought and died before him, and he couldn't let their sacrifice be in vain. They were fighting not just for survival, but for everything that made humanity strong: their freedom, their homes, and their way of life. Inside the base, the humans faced incredible odds. They had no fancy gadgets or alien technology, just their skills, their courage, and their determination. They planted explosives around the main power generators, hoping to cripple the Sithar's weapon systems. But just as they were about to escape, they were discovered. The Sithar forces closed in, and the humans were forced into a brutal firefight. It was in this moment of desperation that Jake and his team showed their true strength. They fought fiercely, using their surroundings to create chaos and confusion among the aliens. Jake's quick thinking and bravery allowed his team to hold off the aliens long enough to complete their mission. The Sithar base erupted in flames as the power systems exploded, leaving the aliens temporarily crippled. Jake and his team barely escaped with their lives, but they had succeeded. The mission was a turning point in the war. It was proof that humans, despite being outmatched and outgunned, were capable of incredible things. The Sithar were beginning to realize that humans were not just another easy conquest. They were a force to be reckoned with. The victory came at a heavy cost. Many of Jake's friends didn't make it out alive. But in their sacrifice, the human resistance gained hope. The war wasn't over, but for the first time, the humans felt like they had a fighting chance. The underdog story of humanity was just beginning, and with every battle, the Sithar were beginning to understand that humans would not go down without a fight. Jake looked out over the battlefield, his heart heavy with loss, but filled with a sense of purpose. The fight for Earth was far from over, but one thing was certain: humans weren't going to let the Sithar win. They had the will to survive, and that made all the difference. As the days passed, the Sithar were beginning to realize that Earth was not the easy conquest they had imagined. Despite their superior technology and vast military power, they were facing something they had never encountered before, an enemy that wouldn't break no matter the odds. The humans were proving to be a much bigger challenge than expected, and the alien forces were starting to feel the pressure. After the successful sabotage of the Sithar base by Jake Carter and his team, the momentum of the human resistance began to grow. More and more civilians, soldiers, and even scientists joined the fight, inspired by the bravery and determination they had witnessed. The Sithar, who had once seen Earth as a simple prize to be taken, now faced an uprising they had no way of predicting. Commander Varath, the leader of the Sithar invasion, paced in his command ship, visibly frustrated. His fleet, once unstoppable, was being held at bay by these primitive humans. He had never lost a battle in his life, and now, for the first time, he was losing control of the situation. Reports from his generals confirmed the worst. The humans were adapting, using guerrilla tactics, and even starting to reverse-engineer alien technology. The Sithar, who once crushed entire civilizations without breaking a sweat, now found themselves in a war of attrition, battling an enemy that refused to give up. "We cannot allow this to continue," Commander Varath growled. "The humans will break if we push them harder. We'll crush them once and for all." But deep down, he began to question if that was true. Could the Sithar truly win against a species so determined, so relentless? Meanwhile, on Earth, the human resistance was growing stronger. Under the leadership of Captain Sarah Mitchell, the resistance leaders began coordinating large-scale attacks against the Sithar forces. They were still outgunned, but they had a new advantage: unity. The world had come together to fight a common enemy, and that unity gave the humans something the Sithar couldn't understand: a sense of purpose. One of the most significant victories came when the human forces launched a massive counterattack on one of the Sithar's largest warships. Using stolen Sithar technology and a combination of surprise tactics, the humans managed to board the ship and plant explosives in its main reactor. As the massive vessel erupted in flames, the humans cheered. It was a victory, but more importantly, it was proof that they could fight and win against the Sithar. The news spread quickly, and the morale of the human resistance soared. The Sithar, once so confident in their superiority, now saw their empire crumbling before them. The humans, those weak creatures they had dismissed as insignificant, were proving to be their greatest threat. Commander Varath watched in horror as his fleet began to fall apart. His once unstoppable forces were now retreating, unable to withstand the relentless human attacks. The Sithar were no longer the victors they had been. The humans had turned the tide, and with each victory they were growing bolder, stronger, and more united. For the first time in the war, the Sithar began to feel fear. They had never encountered an enemy like this. They had never fought a species that would sacrifice everything to protect their home. And now, with the human resistance gaining strength every day, it was clear that Earth's fight for survival wasn't just about keeping their planet safe. It was about proving to the galaxy that humans were a force to be reckoned with. As Commander Varath looked out over the battlefield, he knew the humans had achieved something he never thought possible. They had shown him that sometimes the greatest strength doesn't come from technology or numbers, but from an unbreakable will to fight for what you love. And that, more than anything, terrified him. The war was finally over, but the scars it left behind would last forever. Earth had endured the unimaginable, facing down the alien empire that had once thought they were invincible. The Scythar forces, once vast and unstoppable, were now broken and retreating. Their empire, once proud and unchallenged, had crumbled under the weight of the human resistance. But while the victory was sweet, the aftermath was far from easy. In the days following the final battle, the world was left to pick up the pieces. Cities that had once been thriving metropolises lay in ruins. Skyscrapers were reduced to rubble, and the streets were filled with debris. The humans had won, but at a great cost. Thousands of soldiers and civilians had given their lives to secure Earth's future. The war had left deep emotional wounds, and the road to rebuilding would not be quick or simple. But despite the destruction, there was a sense of hope in the air. Across the planet, the survivors began to rebuild. People came together in ways that hadn't been seen before. Communities worked side by side, rebuilding homes, repairing cities, and tending to the wounded. Governments, once divided, set aside their differences and worked together for the greater good. The unity that had emerged during the war became the foundation for the new world that was rising from the ashes. Captain Sarah Mitchell, who had led many of the Resistance's most daring missions, now found herself working to help her fellow humans heal. The scars of war were visible everywhere, but she saw the strength in her people. She knew that humanity had just proved something incredible. They were not just survivors, they were builders. They had faced extinction, but they had fought back with everything they had, and now they were creating a future. Sergeant Jake Carter, whose team had carried out the mission that dealt a major blow to the Scythar forces, returned home to find his family's house gone, but he still had a family, his fellow soldiers. They had been through hell together, and now they stood side by side, ready to help rebuild. While they couldn't bring back the ones they had lost, they could honor their memory by forging a better world. As the months passed, humanity's recovery continued. The remnants of the Scythar forces had scattered, but they knew their empire was finished. They had underestimated Earth, and now the humans were left to shape their own destiny. They were no longer the weak, helpless species the aliens had once mocked. Earth had become a symbol of resistance, a beacon for those who had once believed they were too small or too powerless to fight back. One of the greatest triumphs of the war was the unity that had been forged between humans. The fight against the Scythar had forced the nations of Earth to put aside their differences and work together. The global conflict had brought humanity closer, and now, with the threat gone, they were more united than ever. People of all backgrounds, races, and beliefs worked together to rebuild their cities, heal their wounds, and forge a new future. Though the war was over, the humans knew they couldn't afford to forget the lessons they had learned. The battle for Earth had been about more than just survival. It was about proving to themselves and to the rest of the galaxy that they would never again be the underdog. They had shown the Scythar that no matter how powerful an enemy may be, the human spirit could never be defeated. In the end, humanity's greatest victory wasn't just the defeat of the Scythar, it was the discovery of their own strength. They had faced overwhelming odds and come out victorious, not because of superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but because they had something far greater, an unbreakable will and a belief in their future. And that was a power no alien empire could ever destroy.